Oh, yes, indeed. We're counting down the hours until the turkey appears on our respective tables, as this is, of course, the day before Thanksgiving. We're here. We're live. Steve Malzberg Show, and we are joined once again in studio, I'm very glad to say, by our friend Paul Callan, CNN legal analyst, former prosecutor, now criminal defense attorney. Great to see you, sir.
Nice being with you.
Nice to have you.
Great Thanksgiving
hands are
day,
cold because this is an icebox. I tell all the guests, doesn't mean I'm sick or anything like that. All right. Big news from the Supreme Court, at least I think so, and I know you think so, where they said that they will hear contraception cases as they relate to Obamacare. And Hobby Lobby is one of those cases, one of those plaintiffs that have said, we have religious freedom, and I'm oversimplifying, you could correct me, but we have you can't force us to provide contraception in a healthcare plan that we give our employees because on religious grounds we object. Government says, well, you're not a church, you're a business, a for-profit business. You have no religious freedom, basically, is what they're saying. And the Supreme Court says, we'll hear it.
Well, yeah, it's really interesting. I think a lot of people are stunned that the Supreme Court is back here again because you remember 2 years ago, very controversial case about the constitutionality of Obamacare.
Thank you, John Roberts, by the way.
Okay, Roberts jumps over and says, it's not a penalty, it's a tax, so this is legal. And a lot of people, the Democrats in particular, have been saying, hey, the Supreme Court has decided this. Why are Republicans trying to kill it again? Well, the Supreme Court's back again now at another issue, and that is, will employers be compelled to provide types of medical services such as, the headline on it is contraception, but when you look at the details, we're talking about the morning after pill, or what a lot of people of religious beliefs say are abortion pills.
Right.
And should a company that has religious beliefs be compelled to provide money to support what they say is a form of abortion? So it's a very controversial issue. The reason the Supreme Court's looking at it is the 10th Circuit, which is a federal court that covers a good portion of the western United States, has ruled one way in a case called the Hobby Lobby case, and another court, the Third Circuit, which covers New Jersey, Delaware, Pennsylvania, went the other way. So we got different laws in different parts of the country, so the Supreme Court has to straighten it out.
And this will take place, next year at some point, correct? They'll
Yes.
have the arguments next year?
That's right, and they just accepted it for review, and, it caused a lot of surprise, I think, that they did.
Where do you think? I mean, it's impossible to tell. It's impossible to tell if we were sitting here after the arguments and waiting for the decision, but based on your knowledge of this court and where they've been before on this issue, on other issues relating to freedom of religion, where do you think they might decide? Well,
the snapshot in the press of this has been it's about corporations, and is a corporation a person? And the Supreme Court has previously said it is. Citizens United, that big case that allowed corporations to fund political candidates, said basically that corporations are persons. Now, the next issue is, if a corporation is a person, can a corporation have a religious belief?
Right.
Now, frankly, Steve, I find it hard to believe that the court would go that far because, let's face it, if a corporation had a religious belief, it would be in money. Right. It wouldn't be in anything that we think of as religion. But the snapshot in the press about this case is totally inaccurate because it's not
What are they missing?
Well, what they're missing is, I don't think anybody seriously believes that the court will think a corporation can have religious beliefs. The court is looking at a law that the Obama administration supported, which was called the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. Now, follow me on this. It was so controversial when Obamacare was passed, and it became apparent that, for instance, the Roman Catholic Church would have to fund insurance that would allow the morning after pill, or this, what people think is an abortion pill.
About here in the private sector.
That's right.
Yeah.
And contraception, which is against Catholic belief. So the Catholic Church and a lot of other large religious institutions put pressure on Congress and the president to create an exception for not-for-profit corporations so that they could refuse to provide this kind of coverage. Now, they had to do this because there are so many big Catholic hospitals and religious hospitals around the country. What would happen if they closed down because it's contrary to religious belief? So they built this exception into the law, and they said if you're a not-for-profit and there's a religious belief that's central to your religion, we'll give you an exception to the law. Well, now along comes two companies. One, Hobby Lobby. Hobby Lobby, founded in Oklahoma, really classic American story, founded in a guy's garage, expands nationwide. He's got 13,000 employees now. The company donates 10% of its profits to charity every year. So they're not doing this because they're on the cheap. They're doing this this opposition to funding
out of
this
moral
law,
belief.
right? Out of moral belief.
And they're threatening that they'll be fined. The fining will take them out of business, and they would close down rather than acquiesce to this law.
Exactly. Now jump to the other side of the country, Pennsylvania. We have this company, Conestoga Wood. Mennonite company, okay, owned by very, very devout religious people. And they have the same problem. They say, hey, this is against our religious belief. But they go before the court and say, hey, you have this law that not-for-profits get a buy, but because we are for-profit corporations, we don't. And the court in the past has said, if you're going to make that kind of a distinction, you have to be able to show that there's what's called a compelling governmental interest.
You mean if the government is going to make that distinction?
That's right.
Okay.
As they do, by compelling. See, what the government's doing is they're saying you have to provide coverage to your employees, and if you do, you have to provide this kind of coverage. Yeah, I shouldn't say you have to supply coverage. You don't have to supply coverage. But if you do, you got to pay for contraceptives. Now, why is that? Why do you have to pay for contraceptives, and in particular for the morning after pill? So they're now trying to establish, the government is, the Justice Department, the Obama administration, that there's a compelling government interest that we have to force coverage for the morning after pill. So I think that's where the court is going to have its focus. Are these companies being discriminated against in a way that the not-for-profits are being permitted to walk away from this exception?
Well, it seems that there's a double standard. So do they just have to prove that they are being treated differently, or do they have to show that there's a no good reason for them to be treated differently?
They have to prove the no good reason.
Yeah.
That's where you get into the compelling state interest.
Right.
You're allowed, for instance, you can have a men's room and a woman's room because the government says, well, that's the way it should be. There's a reason for that. Okay.
So we can. I don't want to go there.
Maybe I'm going down the wrong road here.
No, that'll stop soon too.
Or we can deprive prisoners of free speech because they might riot. All right. So there's a compelling government interest. They might try to escape. So now you got to show what's the compelling government interest
to make these people provide morning after pills.
Right. When just because they make a profit, as opposed to Catholic hospitals or other religious hospitals that don't make a profit. What's the difference?
Yeah.
It's kind of hard to articulate the difference.
It's not like we're talking about colonoscopies.
Right.
We're talking about birth control pills.
Now let me throw one other thing into the mix that I think is really bizarre.
We got a minute and a half. Go ahead. Yeah.
Scalia, the bane of the liberals. They hate him, all right?
Yep.
And Scalia may be the one who saves this law for the Obama administration. I'll tell you why.
I think I couldn't take it, but you go ahead.
I know it's really hard to take. But Scalia in 1990 wrote a decision in a case called Employment Division versus Smith. All right. Now, in that case, an American Indian, or as we now say Native American, was denied the right to collect unemployment benefits because he was using peyote, a hallucinogen, for religious ceremonies.
Okay.
Scalia said, you cannot allow a religious belief to be superior to the law of the land, and he denied the benefits to the Indian.
But he could still legally vote the other way. Is that a precedent?
Well, it's a precedent.
Would it restrict his vote?
Well, no, he could change his mind and vote differently, or come up with some rationale as to why this is different with a Native American than with religious organizations.
Paul Callan, CNN legal analyst, former prosecutor, criminal defense attorney. Always a pleasure. Have a great Thanksgiving.
Thank you.
All right, folks, we're going to come back and we're going to take a look at global warming and what some countries want from us. And by the way, EPA, they're getting ready a whole new slew of regulations that could put them in your backyard if you have any body of water. Steve Malzberg Show, Newsmax TV.